On a cold January afternoon in 2001, in the heart of San Francisco, those consequences erupted in the most horrifying way imaginable. Her name was Diane Whipple, a world-class athlete, a coach, a partner, a woman whose life was full of promise. She wasn't walking into a jungle. She wasn't stepping into a cage. She was simply returning home to her own apartment building. But waiting inside those walls was a predator. Not wild, not free, but confined and primed for disaster. The dog's name was Nova, a massive Presa Canario, an animal bred for strength, dominance, and intimidation. Nova wasn't raised to be a family pet. She was raised to be a weapon. This wasn't just an accident. This was a tragedy born out of neglect, arrogance, and the dangerous illusion that humans can always control nature. In a matter of minutes, a vibrant life was brutally cut short. The attack would horrify the nation. The aftermath would ignite one of the most shocking legal battles in California's history. And the name Diane Whipple would forever be remembered, not for her achievements, but for the brutal way she was taken. Tonight, we uncover the full story of love and loss, of negligence and responsibility, and of how one woman's final moments became a chilling reminder of what happens when the boundaries between man and beast are ignored. This is the story of Diane Whipple and the deadly dog named Nova. Before we dive deeper into this story, I want to ask something important of you. Subscribe to this channel. By subscribing, you're not just following another video. You're joining a community that refuses to let tragedies like Diane Whipple's be forgotten. Every new story we share will reach you first. And together, we'll continue shining light on the hidden dangers people often overlook. Like this video, a simple click shows your support. But more than that, it pushes this story further across YouTube, so more people can see, learn, and reflect. Your single action could be the reason thousands more hear Diane's story. Share this video. Share it with a friend, a family member, or on your social media. Because awareness saves lives. And stories like this one need to be remembered, not buried. Before tragedy struck, Diane Whipple was so much more than just the victim of a horrific story. She was a woman defined by strength, dedication, and heart. Born in 1968, Diane grew up with a love for athletics. From a young age, she showed a natural gift for sports, but more importantly, she carried the discipline and determination to excel at them. That passion eventually led her to lacrosse, where she didn't just participate, she dominated. As an elite athlete, Diane represented the United States at the highest level, competing internationally and earning respect from teammates and rivals alike. She wasn't just skilled, she was fierce, driven, and relentless in her pursuit of excellence. But what truly set her apart wasn't only her talent, it was her spirit. She inspired others to push harder, to never give up, and to believe in themselves. After years of competition, Diane turned her energy toward coaching, teaching the next generation of athletes at St. Mary's College in Moraga, California. To her students, she wasn't just a coach. She was a mentor, a motivator, and a role model who pushed them to believe in their own strength, both on and off the field. Diane believed in hard work, discipline, and the power of teamwork. But she also believed in kindness. Friends and colleagues described her as warm, encouraging, and full of life. The kind of person who lifted others up simply by being around them. Off the field, Diane shared her life with Sharon Smith, her partner and soulmate. Together, they built a home in Pacific Heights, one of San Francisco's quiet, elegant neighborhoods. To the outside world, Diane's life looked full of promise. An accomplished athlete, a devoted coach, and a loving partner. But behind the doors of the very same apartment building lurked a danger no one could have imagined. Two massive Presa Canario dogs, an ancient breed known for their size, strength, and ferocity. These weren't the kinds of dogs you'd see curled up by the fireplace or chasing tennis balls in the park. They were animals bred for domination, intimidation, and, in some cases, violence. Neighbors had already taken notice. The sound of claws scraping across the hallway floor, the deep guttural growls that sent shivers down spines, and the unsettling reality that these dogs seemed impossible to control. One of those dogs was Nova. At 6 feet tall on her hind legs, weighing more than most adult humans, Nova was a towering presence. Muscles rippled beneath her brindle coat. Her massive jaws had the power to crush bone in an instant. To many, she was terrifying just to look at. And she was just one door down from Diane Whipple. Diane, full of life and promise, had no way of knowing that danger lived right across the hall. No one knew that her love for life would soon collide with the unleashed power of captivity gone wrong. And when that collision came, it would change everything. Nova and her companion Bane were no ordinary pets. These were Presa Canarios, a rare breed of mastiff originating from Spain's Canary Islands. Historically, they were bred to guard livestock, fight off predators, and, in darker times, for dog fighting itself. Their sheer size and power made them both protectors and potential killers. Imagine a dog that could weigh over 130 pounds, with jaws strong enough to snap bones. A dog that could rise to 6 feet when standing on its hind legs, with a body built not for cuddles, but for control. These were not golden retrievers. They were living weapons, but in San Francisco, Nova and Bane didn't live on a farm or in the care of professional handlers. They lived in an apartment complex. Their owners, two attorneys, Marjorie Knoller and Robert Noel, were not seasoned trainers nor responsible guardians. They were ambitious, arrogant, and intoxicated by the idea of owning animals that symbolized fear and dominance. Knoller and Noel obtained Nova and Bane through their bizarre connection to Paul "Corn-Fed" Schneider, a notorious white supremacist and prison gang member serving a life sentence. Schneider orchestrated the breeding of these dogs from behind bars, using them as extensions of his influence outside prison walls. To him, they were not companions. They were status symbols. And Knoller and Noel eagerly played along. Neighbors inside the Pacific Heights apartment building were living with a nightmare. Hallways that should have been safe felt more like gauntlets of fear. Every time Nova or Bane were walked through the building, tenants pressed themselves against walls or ducked back into their apartments. The growls were deep, guttural, and unforgettable, the kind that vibrated in your chest and reminded you of just how small you were. Witnesses would later describe lunges, snapping jaws, and near misses in the hallway. Some said they were afraid to leave their apartments at the same time as the dogs. Complaints were made, warnings were given, but Knoller and Noel brushed them aside, sometimes even mocked those who spoke out. In their eyes, Nova and Bane weren't dangerous liabilities. They were trophies, reflections of power, living embodiments of control. Those who understood the breed saw it for what it was, a ticking time bomb. Two massive, uncontrollable forces, confined within a residential building where families lived, where children visited, where neighbors passed daily. And as every complaint was ignored, as every warning fell on deaf ears, the fuse grew shorter and shorter. No one could know the exact day it would ignite, but everyone who heard the growls felt the danger was only a matter of time. If this story already has you on edge, then imagine living next door to that constant threat, never knowing when the danger might strike. That's why I invite you to subscribe. By subscribing, you're choosing to stay informed, to stand with us as we continue uncovering true stories of danger, tragedy, and the lessons they leave behind. Every new video becomes a reminder that silence and ignorance can cost lives. Don't forget to like this video. A single click may feel small, but it gives strength to stories like this, helping them rise above the noise and making sure Diane's story, and others like it, are not lost in the shadows. Share this video. Share it with your friends, your family, or on your social media. Because spreading awareness is more than just passing along a story. It's planting a warning, a message, and maybe even saving someone from facing the same fate. January 26, 2001. It was a chilly Friday afternoon in San Francisco. For Diane Whipple, the day was routine. She had just finished shopping, carrying grocery bags back into her Pacific Heights apartment building. Nothing about that moment hinted at the nightmare waiting for her just a few steps away. But inside those walls, in the narrow hallway leading to her front door, danger was waiting. And this time, it couldn't be avoided. As Diane reached her floor, she encountered her neighbor, Marjorie Knoller, struggling with one of her massive Presa Canarios, Nova. At over 120 pounds of pure muscle, Nova was restless, straining against the leash. The narrow hallway suddenly became a trap. There was nowhere for Diane to move, nowhere to hide, nowhere to escape. In that instant, everything changed. With explosive force, Nova lunged. The leash was useless, the handler powerless. In a flash, the massive dog's jaws clamped down on Diane. Her groceries fell to the floor, scattering across the hallway. Her screams tore through the building, echoing down the walls. Neighbors would later describe the sound of the attack, the guttural growls of the dog, the desperate cries of Diane, the chaos that filled those few minutes. Knoller shouted, tried to pull Nova back, but it was too late. The dog's massive head shook violently, tearing into Diane's body. Every second was catastrophic. Every second drained her strength. The hallway became a scene of horror. Despite desperate attempts to intervene, Nova's grip was unrelenting. It wasn't a single bite. It wasn't a momentary lunge. It was sustained, merciless. Diane's arms, her neck, her torso, all became targets of the assault. This wasn't an accident. It was a full-blown attack, fueled by the sheer power and instinct of a predator that should never have been inside an apartment building. By the time paramedics arrived, Diane was unrecognizable from the injuries. The bites had shredded her clothing and torn deep into her flesh. Blood covered the hallway floor. Emergency responders fought to stabilize her, working against time, against blood loss, against shock. She was rushed to San Francisco General Hospital. Doctors did everything they could, but the trauma was too severe, the wounds too deep. Within hours, Diane Whipple was gone. She was just 33 years old, a world-class athlete, a devoted coach, a loving partner, a life full of promise, destroyed in minutes. Not by a wild predator in the wilderness, but by a captive animal in the very place where she should have been safest, her own home. For her neighbors, the screams would haunt them forever. For her loved ones, the loss was beyond comprehension. And for the nation, the brutality of the attack sparked outrage and disbelief. The tragedy didn't end with Diane Whipple's death. In many ways, it had only just begun. Because what followed was one of the most shocking and controversial legal battles in California's history. At the center of that storm were Diane's neighbors, attorneys themselves, Marjorie Knoller and Robert Nowell. The very people sworn to uphold the law would now find themselves on trial for their role in unleashing this horror. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture. Knoller and Nowell weren't just careless pet owners. They were reckless, arrogant, and blind to repeated warnings. Neighbors had complained about Nova and Bane for months. The dogs lunged in hallways, snapped at passers-by, and terrified anyone who crossed their path. But instead of taking responsibility, Knoller and Nowell dismissed the concerns, insisting the dogs were misunderstood. That arrogance would become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Marjorie Knoller, who had been holding Nova's leash during the attack, was charged with second-degree murder, an unprecedented step in California law. It marked the first time an owner had been accused of murder, not just negligence, in a fatal dog mauling case. The question at the heart of the trial was clear. When an animal kills, who is responsible? Is it the animal, acting on instinct? The owner, who failed to control it? Or the system, who ignored the warnings until it was too late? The defense argued that the attack was a tragic accident, that Nova had acted unpredictably, without warning. They tried to paint Knoller and Nowell as unfortunate victims of circumstance, not criminals. But the evidence told a different story. Witnesses described previous incidents of lunges and narrow escapes. A mail carrier testified about being frightened by the dogs. Neighbors recalled being unable to use the hallway without fear. And experts confirmed what everyone already knew. These animals were bred for intimidation, and their owners had ignored every red flag. Even Knoller's behavior in court added fuel to the fire. She showed little remorse, often appearing defensive, even hostile. To the jury, she didn't look like a grieving neighbor haunted by tragedy. She looked like someone unwilling to admit fault. In contrast, the prosecution emphasized the magnitude of Diane's suffering, the preventable nature of her death, and the clear negligence of the owners who allowed these dogs to live in a crowded apartment building. After weeks of testimony, the verdict was delivered. Marjorie Knoller was convicted of second-degree murder. Robert Nowell, her husband, was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and keeping a mischievous animal that caused death. It was a groundbreaking ruling, sending shockwaves across the nation. For the first time, the law made it clear: owning a dangerous animal is not just a private choice. It is a responsibility, with consequences as serious as life and death. But even as the verdict was celebrated by some, questions lingered. Was justice truly served? Or had the courts overstepped by treating a dog mauling as murder? For Diane's loved ones, the convictions brought some measure of accountability. Yet, no courtroom ruling could undo the damage or bring her back. What it did do was set a precedent, forever changing how the law views responsibility in cases of animal attacks. Behind every headline, every courtroom sketch, every shocking detail of this case was a woman who had lost everything. Sharon Smith wasn't just Diane Whipple's roommate. She wasn't just her friend. She was Diane's partner, her love, her family. But in 2001, same-sex relationships were not recognized the way they are today. And that meant Sharon wasn't guaranteed the same rights, the same protections, or even the same respect as a surviving spouse. From the very beginning, Sharon made a choice. Diane's death would not be just another tragic statistic. She demanded accountability, not only from Marjorie Knoller and Robert Nowell, but from a legal system that too often dismissed same-sex partners as outsiders. Her fight was not just about justice for Diane, it was about recognition. It was about being seen. It was about making the courts acknowledge her love, her grief, and her right to stand as Diane's surviving partner. Sharon's case became a turning point. It forced the courts to recognize her standing, to allow her to sue for wrongful death, something unheard of at the time for same-sex partners. In doing so, Sharon Smith didn't just carry Diane's memory forward. She carved a path for countless others who would one day face the same struggle. She turned unspeakable grief into a fight for equality. A fight that would echo far beyond that San Francisco apartment building. Her courage meant that Diane's story would never vanish into silence. It meant that their love, dismissed by many, ignored by law, was finally acknowledged in the eyes of justice. And in that way, Sharon Smith transformed personal tragedy into public change. She made sure Diane's death was not in vain, and that her legacy would live on, not only as a warning about responsibility and captivity, but as a powerful moment in the fight for human rights. Sharon Smith's fight reminds us all, even in the darkest moments, courage can light the way toward change. The shocking death of Diane Whipple was more than just a horrific dog attack. It was the result of negligence, arrogance, and the deadly risk of treating powerful animals as property rather than responsibility. Nova, the dog at the center of this tragedy, became more than just a name. She became a symbol of what happens when human recklessness collides with raw animal strength. And Diane's story became a lasting warning, a reminder that ignoring the dangers of captivity and control doesn't just invite risk, it can cost innocent lives. Stories like Diane's deserve to be remembered, not hidden, not forgotten. And you can help keep them alive. Subscribe so you never miss the stories that reveal the hidden dangers of captivity, responsibility, and the choices we make around animals and people. Like, because every click pushes this story into the light, where it can educate others and prevent future tragedies. And share, because somewhere, someone still believes that powerful animals can be controlled without consequence. This story might change their mind and save a life. Diane's life was filled with promise. Her story must be a warning and a legacy.